Welcome back. On Tuesday, it's Human Rights Day, and youth, civil society and affected communities in Cape Town are set to demonstrate under the banner Don't Gas Africa. Amongst their demands are energy, water, housing and food access for all. Let us now hear from the campaigner Dean Bhebhe about plans for the march. Good evening to you, Dean. Thank you very much for joining us here on Newsnight. First and foremost, just talk us through the reasoning for this campaign and this march that we will see take place on Human Rights Day.
Thank you for having me. So the March for System Change is an ongoing campaign and march calling for the climate crisis to be used as an opportunity to address the interlinking issues of energy poverty, lack of sustainable housing, water, and food insecurity. Furthermore, the march on Tuesday is specifically focusing on addressing the energy crisis and calling on the government to abandon all exploration for fossil fuels, and specifically, in this instance, gas, both offshore and on land. As well as, this march really comes at a very important time in terms of showing solidarity with the dash for gas across Africa. Fossil fuel-induced energy apartheid in Africa has left 600 million Africans without access to modern, clean, renewable energy. And we believe South Africa can and must be a leading force on the African continent as it relates to our energy future, to achieve energy democracy and deliver renewable energy assets into the hands of the people and communities across the continent.
I'm looking at the statement released here, and in it reads that fossil fuel-induced energy apartheid in Africa. Could you just expand on the statement and what exactly is meant by it?
So essentially what we're trying to mention around the statement is that we live in a crisis where currently we have 600 million people without energy access. And that has been fundamentally governed by a fossil fuel system, a fossil fuel cycle, which is oil, coal, and gas. And again, we see this instance where Africa as a whole, as a continent, has been exploited, has been segregated. And again, many years down the line, we're still not yet developed. And once again, there's this big dash for gas again. And Africa is to be used as a gas station to be exploited. And at the same time, it's the very same system that has governed and left communities across Africa vulnerable. So what we mean by energy apartheid is basically a system based on fossil gas production does not put Africans at the forefront because it does not consider how it affects us, seeing as Africa is one of the most hotspot regions across the globe that is mostly affected by climate change. Second of all, when it comes to the exports around gas production, it is not for Africans, but instead it's for other countries outside Africa. So essentially that energy system does not put Africans at the heart of it. And essentially as well, if we look at the energy crisis currently, we cannot want to use the same system that's already left us already lacking energy access across the continent, and inevitably are really creating a cycle of poverty all over again before adopting again a fossil fuel production system that has already failed the continent in the last 50 years.
Then, Mr. Bhebhe, what sort of alternatives do you have in mind then? What sort of solutions would you like to see implemented here?
Well, I think the most important systematic alternative when it comes to this aspect is really leapfrogging towards renewable energy, which really promises accessibility and to really try and really bridge the gap, the growing energy poverty across Africa. So in terms of a very, very viable alternative, I'd look to renewable energy because that is something that is free and that is something that's readily available, and that is a source that is very rich in Africa.
I'm just looking at your list of demands here in the statements, and one of the points is that the Department of Basic Education must adjust the national education curriculum to improve national literacy to climate change that focuses on adequately preparing youth for the realities of the climate crisis. Just expand on that point and why you find this of just importance.
Well, it's very easy. The world is undergoing major changes with risks, uncertainties, and opportunities. And in the midst of that, we have the climate emergency, the climate crisis, and the impact of climatic shocks through floods, through droughts, through rising global temperatures. And with that backdrop, we have to also understand that not a lot of people fundamentally are climate aware. And we believe that this is a gap that exists within the education system, where we believe that the government needs to tap into that in order for people to be educated around the impacts of climate change, because fundamentally it does affect people at the household level, For example, if we're looking at certain areas that are suffering through drought or water crises, that is all linked to climate change, but they wouldn't necessarily be equipped with the right educational tools to actually understand as to why they're in that crisis, as to why they lack access to clean water, why they don't have access to electricity, for example. So we believe bridging that gap around climate awareness would really help reach, a common cause at the household level in order for people to understand the climate crisis and how it intersects with their socioeconomic livelihoods.
Are you looking forward to there being some progress with regards to this march taking place on Human Rights Day? Because there was a march, or the first march rather, in September 2022. Was there any answers or progress given then? And are you hopeful that this time you will see some progress?
Yeah, I think definitely we're very hopeful because I think the climate emergency is not waiting for anyone. The climate crisis has already arrived. We've seen already with the floods in Durban the past year. We saw right now currently Malawi is going through a lot of floods. And we as members of the Don't Gas Africa believe that the magnitude of the crisis we face demands systematic change that results in creation of sustainable societies and new relations between human beings and nature based on equality and reciprocity. And this fundamentally builds on the backdrop of a hugely problematic African Common Position on Energy Access and Transition that the African Union Ministerial Technical Committee has proposed to lay ground to expand, Africa's energy future on fossil gas. And again, it sounds great because they are trying to preach around energy access and addressing the energy crisis. But instead, really, what it essentially represents are the interests of the fossil fuel industry by explicitly stating that gas will continue to play a crucial role in the continent's energy mix. And the current energy crisis in South Africa represents currently, as we are experiencing load shedding, a systematic plan by the fossil fuel industry to lock its people in a cycle of need, want, poverty, and fear. And the continent now sits at a crossroads, and there's a fight to decide its energy and development future.
Mr. Bhebhe, just lastly, give us details about this march. Who will be taking part? When will it start? Where will it start? And where will it end?
Yeah, so the march is going to be on Tuesday. It's going to start at 10 a.m. As a coalition here in South Africa, we've got Africa Climate Alliance, Project 90 by 2030, Green Connection, Extinction Rebellion, Cape Town, 350 Africa, Greenpeace, Cape Town Volunteers, and they'll all be following on the previous demands that have been delivered to Parliament on a number of occasions, including, the additional focus of stopping fossil fuel projects. And this will really essentially start close to company gardens and end at the parliamentary buildings here in Cape Town. So
right.
The time to be specific is from 10 to 12:30.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhebhe, for your time and for sharing those details with us. We appreciate your time. That was Dean Bhebhe from Don't Gas Africa, just talking us about the intention for a march that will be taking place in Cape Town. They will be marching for system change, and youth, civil society and affected communities will be taking part there.